Yeah, before the video starts, I just wanted to say this is added in last. This is filmed way, way after the original voiceover. But yeah, 100 subscribers. Well, about I think it's about what 115 at the moment. 115 subscribers and 1,000 views on deal making and you. That is insane. But yeah, I guess we could say that behind the scenes is kind of a 100 subscriber, like 1,000 view special. Yeah. Without further ado, the video. Deal making anew, arming yourself for success, and negotiating at speed. These are known and beloved in the No Big Deal community. And I have said for a while that I would go and do a behind the scenes of how I went around filming the series. And, well, before we get into how I filmed it, how I edited it, and how we sorted out all of the audio, I kind of want to take a moment to step back and talk about why I started the series. No Big Deal, as of the time of recording this video, doesn't have a formal tutorial, and is primarily why I believe a good majority of players don't stick around, because the game is quite confusing, especially for a newcomer. And what I'd ended up always doing is that whenever a new player ended up joining my server, I always found it was kind of my job to kind of sit down and explain how the game works to them, kind of like the training series implies. So it was mostly out of my two greatest teammates and friends in the No Big Deal community, Jay and Elox, who said, "You're actually pretty good at teaching new players how to play the game." And I'd already joked in the past about some sort of project that I wanted to do for No Big Deal. And for the longest time, this was going to be a TV show. And then I saw that another team of very talented individuals were already doing that job. And I thought, me as a one-man army, not really going to do this with no experience whatsoever. So I'd always joked that a very fun way and very entertaining would be to do like a training VHS, because it fits the time period that No Big Deal is set in, which is 1985 and the peak in the midst of capitalist consumerist corporate America. And I thought it'd be quite funny to have a universal training video constructed by UltraCorp to teach new players, regardless of company, how to play the game. And it actually was rather interesting from a perspective, because I have not done any of this before. I've not done anything relating to voice acting, video editing, filmmaking, audio editing, anything of the likes. So, a big inspiration is that I started looking at a lot of these videos, and I set my eyes on a very famous one, which will be linked in the description below, which is an 80s Mercedes-Benz training VHS tape, teaching new car salesmen why and how to sell a Mercedes. And I fell in love with this video, because it feels so on par like something that would be produced in the No Big Deal universe. And so, with nothing but a great idea in my head, and a lot of very funny references that I could put in, I set off. And I learned all the skills that I could, at least to make the first deal making a new video, within 2 weeks. So if I can do it, you can do it easily. So, starting off with the audio and the script. The script went through probably about 13 revisions before I sat on the final script for deal making and you. The other scripts subsequently had less and less rewrites, to the point where negotiating at speed only went through one rewrite. So once the script had been filmed, script had been written, I should say, I began trying to record. And the audio was recorded on this headset that I'm using now, which is what I use for gaming and I use for everyday use, and Windows inbuilt voice recorder, which is also what this is being recorded on. I know there's 100 different ways that are probably 100 times better to do this, but it's what worked for me, and is what will continue to work. And so, once I had finished, doing my voiceover for the script, that's probably the easiest bit out of the way. I then needed to get the footage, which you may have noticed that the filming process is actually quite push and pull. If I'm the one speaking in the videos, who the hell is controlling the camera? And Some of you may say, oh, you've gotten a friend to help, which, for some shots, true. You may have seen the girl in the introduction in the first bit of cutaways and pieces for Deal Making and You, the one who is pointing the gun at my face. That is my girlfriend, who I asked to come and help film with the first few scenes, but apart from that, I've not had any real external help filming the series. It has always been a one-man band, occasionally with a few pieces of help for scripted stuff. But you may be wondering, how did I get 2 Roblox accounts to film and act at the same time? And this is actually quite interesting. Some of you may be aware of the client-side mod for Roblox known as Blockstrap, or more recently, Fishstrap. And what is quite interesting about these mods is that they have a feature for client-side multi-instance launching, which is a very, very long-winded term to say that you can launch multiple Roblox sessions from different accounts on the same computer. So a lot of you may know this as a method of how people bot farm in maybe a game like All-Star Tower Defense, Grow a Garden, Steal a Brain Rot, yada yada yada. I've done it in a push and pull way. 2 clients, 1 films, 1 acts. And this is all filmed, at least for the speaking roles, within a private server. The other stuff is filmed from actual public lobbies, real gameplay footage between real players that are unaware anything is going on, filmed by myself in both spectator mode and from actual gameplay perspective with my GUI turned off. And a funny little issue of this is that the biggest challenge in the filming was, it's like wildlife photography. You're trying to get the perfect shot. And as someone who is a perfectionist, I know exactly what I want, when I want it, and how I'm going to get it. But unfortunately, the universe does not bend to my favor. And there have been 100 different times that in all the clips that you have seen, there is probably at least 9 versions of that clip where everything has fucked up horribly. In the gunplay footage for Arming Yourself for Success, it was a very common occurrence to either die using the gun that I was trying to capture footage for, or my entire team would kill anybody before I got any reasonable footage. And so, of course, what I'd have to do is take a massive sigh, stop recording, delete the footage, and focus on just trying to simultaneously play and spectate games with the occasional hope that if I ever hit F12 to start recording, it would just pick up everything that I wanted. But going back to the private server filming, a huge help during this section is getting the server operator Game Pass. I know a lot of you might not enjoy it, but for a filming perspective, it is absolutely huge, even if it is clunky and a bit bare bones at the moment. But spawning in stuff like projects, cars, items, guns, and giving them infinite ammo is more than enough. And especially with things like being able to do the CVAR editing, so I can set the round time to be 10,000 minutes. So it means that I have not got to worry about the round ending before I get all my footage. And this would typically be the longest period in the video making part. But the next bit is truly what makes the video so special, and the series as a whole. Post-production editing was a challenge, especially for someone who has never done any of this before. And I had to learn as I go. And of course, since I am a broke university student, I do not have the money to shell out 200 pounds, dollars, euros, whatever your local currency is, for a licensed copy of something like Adobe Premiere Pro, or an extended copy of CapCut. I've done all of this in free software. So that's the free version of Davinci Resolve for the video editing, and the audio editing was handled in Audacity. So, stitching the footage together was rather simple, as Davinci gives you so many tools to play around with. And you may have noticed that some transitions between shots are rather abrupt, and some are smooth. That is personally my choice. While they're not present in Deal Making and You, it's a stylistic choice that I have taken from Arming Yourself for Success, and will continue to use this going forward. Which is, whenever I am appearing to speak, it is a sharp cut, but whenever it is footage transitioning between each other, it is cross-dissolve transitions. Of course, that's the easy stuff, simply just smushing pieces of video together, adding transitions between everything. Okay, that's fine. But you're here for the more heavy stuff, the stuff that actually took me a good while to figure out. The process of making it look and sound like a VHS tape. And I'm not a perfect man, I'm not going to say that I've done all of this myself, and I will link the tutorials that I had used right below this video as well. These being by River of Valley for the audio, Jake Hayden for any kind of like custom text that you may have seen in the videos, but I won't explain this in the video, and Nomad Art Productions, which goes over the VHS settings. But starting off with the audio, this was actually one that I quite enjoyed learning, because I like audio editing. So the audio was first inserted into Audacity and immediately converted from mono to stereo. So instead of it playing two independent channels in the left ear and the right ear, it would just play one continuous channel in both. So following this, I'd apply a filter curve, which basically reduces the highest of highs in the audio and the lowest of lows, to kind of reduce the sharpness in the audio, using one of the preset filters, which was an AM radio, which sounds very similar to what like an old TV and radio from around that time period would actually produce, which makes the audio sound crunchy. But a convincing aspect of any VHS, especially with something like this, is the noise feedback produced from the TV when it's turned on. So to mimic this, I add two mono tracks and fill them with a sawtooth tone at 60 Hz at an amplitude of 0.01, and fill the other track with a pink noise at an amplitude of 0.01 as well. You might not understand what this is, but from an audio perspective, these are two different tracks that produce different kinds of noises that are meant to be kind of more like static buzzing and more of like a static whirring. So it sounds like the static when you used to put your head close to an old CRT TV, which, although I am 20, I still have memories of this, and it is an absolute shame that most people who are younger than me do not have this memory at all. So, once we've done this, this gives the background feedback to the audio, which sounds like TV static. And what I will play for you now is just a random selection of audio. You know what it sounds like anyway, but here goes. Okay.
No, he just walked right into that. I wish I could have clipped that.
Well, I have. Alright, had fun? Cool. Moving on to the actual footage editing, we begin the process by first grabbing a VHS overlay. And this, you could get this wherever the hell you want. And there's so many out there that are available to use for free. And your choice of that, entirely up to you. So what we do is we then merge, at least within Davinci's Fusion tab, we merge both the first piece of footage, which is the footage we want the overlay for, and the VHS overlay itself. Then what we do is we merge those on top, which is quite nice, and then we add a background, which doesn't have to be connected at the moment. So the background, once added, doesn't have to matter what color. We want to make this into a 4:3 aspect ratio, as this is what VHS tapes used. And of course, to put a bit of a perspective, 16:9 it would be about 1920 or 1080 and higher, which, of course, most modern displays come in. So we change the background size to 640x480, and then we merge this already overlaid VHS overlay onto the background, which, as you may see here, is relatively zoomed in. So what we can do now is zoom out so our footage fits neatly into the display without any issues of background transparency or any kind of black bars that appear that don't want to be there. So now that we have the correct resolution and aspect ratio, what we want to do is mimic how the VHS footage split their color channels, which squishes the luminance, which is, the black and white footage, the lights and the darks, differently to the color footage, which is squished even further. And as a point of reference, luminance is about half the resolution of the base footage, and the color footage is about a 16th. So we basically work on a resize to squish both of those down and connect them in separate channels. So we have one channel dedicated towards the color and one channel dedicated towards the luminance. Once we've squished those down, we apply the same total footage that we have, and we merge those back together. So now that we have like the effect that adds something kind of like a color bleed, and of course it reduces the overall quality of the footage, which makes it look a lot more convincing. Then what we want to do is we want to add a screen blur with a strength of 2 and a sharpen of 1. This creates more of a subtle sharpening, where there's still like, there's still video damage, but it's not as sharp, so the lines don't appear as like crisp as what they should. Everything's got a like warmness to it. And some of you may have noticed that in some of the shots, you may have noticed a slight waviness at the bottom of the screen, where the footage warps slightly. This was done by adding a waviness node, making sure that it's not animated, cranking up the strength and scale to the highest possible integer, and then adding a rectangle node, stretching it extra long and squishing it down and moving it to the bottom of the screen. Which, now, when anything goes through this sort of like triangle path in the footage, it warps slightly. Very cool. Simulates any kind of like damage that the VHS footage has gone through. Then we add a film grain, which, of course, my settings have been tweaked to match the footage in the color palette of No Big Deal's art direction. So, whatever works for whatever footage you're trying to capture, you've just got to play around with your settings. And now we've got to desaturate the footage. As VHS tapes, as they get copied over and wear down over time, the colors dull out and become desaturated. Which, if you wanted like a regular, undamaged VHS footage, you'd kind of oversaturate it slightly. But because of No Big Deal's art design being quite warm in the color palette, we wanted to desaturate it. So we wanted to add a color corrector, which allows us to tweak how dark and light the contrasting video looks. We reduce both contrast for our darkest darks and our lightest lights. This is because the VHS tapes back then lacked the dynamic color output that most modern formats have now. So colors wouldn't appear as bright or they wouldn't appear as dark. And to finish it all off, we would add a screen shake that was tweaked for my footage using settings that I personally feel like looks fine. Which is why you may see subtly, as the footage goes on, I jitter, either left to right or up and down. That's just due to like the VHS static being played. And finally, for the intro. A lot of you have probably also got this tune stuck in your head, and several of you have asked me what song this was. And before I even began working on this, I had found some music that I knew from day one would be in the intro, which is The Main Attraction by Keith Mansfield. So now that we have put everything together and slowly pieced things together to create what we know and love, this would technically either be whatever footage I would use for deal making anew or any kind of employee training series, but it's not as complicated as I probably have described it to be. And if you just follow the tutorials below, you could easily make something that looks like what the series does. Because the one thing I hate is keeping things locked away behind a gate. I hope this has all been slightly interesting to watch, and I thank you all for making it this far and listening to an old man ramble. But make sure to keep an eye out for episode 4 of the Employee Training Series, and I hope to see you all in the future, whether in-game or outside. But bye for now, everybody. Bye-bye.